This is the Milo Sweet Podcast, where you'll learn to get unstuck. Start now. Conquer life's challenges by learning to do difficult. Find quick and clever ways to overcome. Wait, did you think life was going to be easy? Remember, all of your excuses are now dead to me. Let's get started. Guess what time it is? It's time for you to hit the subscribe button and find just 1% that you think will benefit from this. But if you're feeling a little like generous, right? Or you're super free with your time right now, probably doing nothing because you're listening to this. Well, maybe if you're doing something, actually just make yourself free right now. Hit subscribe. What are you waiting for? Hit it. Come on. Hit subscribe. My next question for you was going to be, how does that translate into parenting? And it's very interesting you say that, because as a parent, like when I was a new parent, I felt like I wanted to hover over my newborn baby and make sure I shielded them from everything. And then finally, I reflected on what I wanted them to be when they were older. I was like, what's the best case scenario that I could have when my daughter or son is 21? And I thought, well, I want them to be sure of themselves. I want them to be able to adapt from their mistakes. I want them to approach failure with learning a new skill and feeling like I failed, but I can go back out there and win. And once I realized that, I was like, whoa, where's the book that teaches you that? And for me, it was really just delving into I found that the best parenting book was business books, which sounds really weird. Mm-hmm. But for me, I couldn't find a parenting book that actually matched that concept for me. Possibly they exist now. This was a 10 years ago. But I found that businesses address failure with learning, with adaptation. And so that was basically how I built my parenting philosophy. And it's very interesting because you feel guilty about that at first. You also feel very alone as a parent to approach parenting that way, because it's very custom, meaning your friends might be doing something else in their parenting style, and you might know that this is the best way to parent your individual kid, to give them the exact tool they're going to need when they're 21 or 30 or 40. And that can be very isolating. So we talked about a little bit about parenting, and now I want to change it up and talk about the foundations of trust. I find trust is very intangible. So you can feel like you're building trust, right? Like you just said that if you have one that's the giver and you have one that's the taker, in that scenario, if it's set up that way, you feel like, yeah, we're building trust because things feel good. They look good. They're working. But what are some things that maybe that couple or in that scenario, they're not really taking into consideration? Or that maybe would be principles for all couples to take into consideration to build trust?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a couple things that are the foundations of trust. I think predictability is a huge part of trust. It's knowing how that person thinks. And so predictability creates trust. So if I know how you think, then I can trust you. And I think, as a culture, we're pretty divided in the United States. And part of it is we don't really trust the way that we don't even know what really other people think.
Right.
We don't really, there's a story of that missionary that went on the island, they got murdered back, a few years ago in off the coast of India in some small island. If we don't understand people's thought process, we just see somebody who looks different. And, obviously, probably wasn't the wisest decision for that guy to go do that. In hindsight, it was a terrible idea. He ended up getting murdered. But if we don't understand how people think, we don't trust that person. This guy was, from my understanding, he was Asian, did not look like anybody on that island. He's wearing clothes that are different. He's showing up on a boat, which they don't have access to. He's speaking language. If we don't understand how people think, we immediately assume they're evil or there's something wrong with them. And So I think predictability breeds trust. And how we get predictability is we understand how somebody thinks. And how we understand how somebody thinks, we have intimacy, we have vulnerability, we have open heart talks. We aren't defensive, and we are accessible. We are kind-hearted. And if we are, because that's really what we're trying to figure out. What we're trying to figure out in those kind of scenarios are, can I get my needs met with this person? And if we feel like, yes, I can get my needs met with this person, then we feel like we can trust them. They're here for me. And we feel valuable, because that's a part of our need, is if I feel like I can get my needs met with you, then I feel valuable. And so trust is ultimately about predictability. And predictability is about knowing how somebody thinks, what their thought process is. And if we know what their thought process is, that's because they've been open and vulnerable and shared who they are with us. And what we have today, and the way our technology is not really helping us, because we maybe have more access to information, but it also kind of keeps us in echo chambers.
Mm-hmm.
We start getting confirmation bias, and we don't have these discussions that we need to have where we're really learning from people who think different than us. And we're not really understanding other people's points of view. And we're not really having these long discussions and these dialogues, because everybody is, I think, obviously there's some bad people in the world, but the vast majority of people are well-intended, want what's good. And even the people who, maybe just want to cause chaos and destruction, maybe at one point in time, they wanted the same things, and they've maybe have given up on themselves. But if we can honor that and recognize that, and maybe, begin to have talks and begin to try to understand people who are different, we can have deeper relationships. But ultimately, that's where trust comes from. I'm giving you the long answer.
No, you gave me a beautiful answer. This is a beautiful answer.
My wife asked me a question, and I'll give her the 10-minute answer. But foundations of trust are really, in my opinion, about predictability. And that comes from understanding somebody's thought process, which to have that, we have to have open-hearted talks without accusations of you're evil, you're bad, you're no good, and just really, try to get to the middle, get to where we're at. And I think if we can do that, people are going to be, more fulfilled. One of the reasons I don't think that happens on a national scale is I think the media and even the political parties thrive on divisiveness.
Yes.
And I think, there's no views if you don't have somebody heated, mad at each other. You don't have people donating money or going out to vote if there isn't some divisive issue going on. But people I've talked to from no matter what party, they really want the same things.
Exactly.
And they're really not that far off from each other. It's just maybe different ways of achieving the goals, but it's pretty much the same. And so, I think as a broader part of our society, we can trust each other more if we can understand how each other thinks. And that, predictability is a big part of that.
All right, that's another episode in the books. Hello? I said it's over. Why are you still listening? Seriously, the episode is over. If you're still listening right now, you know what? You're probably a chronic procrastinator. Guess what? I'm still listening too. Come on, for real, seriously. We gotta go do something productive. No, for real. No, for real. Okay, you can keep listening.